Welcome back to our podcast on geopolitics, the podcast where we dive deep into the fascinating realms of the shape of our world. I am your host here, Hari Prakash Sinha, coming to you from the vibrant heart of New Delhi, India. Today we are embarking on a journey into the intricate tapestry of geopolitics. It's the topic that influences our very fabric of our global community, affecting economics, societies, and the interaction between nations. Our focus today will be on Japan. But before we delve into the geopolitics in labyrinth, let me introduce you to a distinguished guest, an expert whose insight will illuminate our discussion. We are honored to have Dr. Adityanjee. He is the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. You can visit his website, the Council for Strategic Affairs.org, to learn more about his organization. So welcome Dr. Adityanjee, welcome to our platform once again.
Thank you, Hari Prakash ji. It's always a pleasure to come to your platform. I'm always happy because you always have some interesting topics to discuss. So here we are.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I am very proud to have you on my platform actually. So coming to the topic, I just give you a background. PM Narendra Modi, after coming to power, started engaging with Japan with much fanfare. He promised a single window for all types of clearances under PM's direct supervision. But we see only the bullet train project started. We don't see any Japanese interest in India now. So I am a bit of concerned about what is the future of the relationship between India and Japan. So with this background, I am coming to you with my first question. What do you think is hindering the India-Japan relationship from growing?
I think there are some complex historical reasons for that. And I think we need to understand that background before talking about nation-to-nation bilateral relationship in current geopolitical scenario. Although we are two friendly nations, we are not at the same phase of our developmental cycles. Let's be very frank about it. People in India feel very, very proud of the fact that ancient India did influence Japanese culture, Japanese civilization, and Japanese religion. Actually, the Shinto religion and Buddhist religion both are from India. They are India's gift to Japan. The ancient Shinto religion people do not understand is basically a variant of Sanatana Dharma. Shinto is Shin-tu. It was basically a derivative of Sindhu. So that is where the Shinto word comes from. And if you look at ancient Shinto gods and goddesses, they are all Sanatana Dharma, goddess and goddesses. Their names are in Japanese, but they have the same form. So you would find Saraswati and Ganesha in Shinto religion. They have actually Sanskrit shlokas in Japanese that Shinto priests would chant. And we are very enamored of this cultural influence historically in Japan. You look at all the Shinto temples, they will end with the word ji. Okay? So these are very interesting observations. So culturally, there is affinity. But being an island nation, the survival was hard. Japan actually started to modernize during the Meiji Restoration. And that was in, 18th and 19th century. And actually Meiji Restoration gave the vibrancy to Japan to become a superpower in earlier part of the 20th century. Whereas we were enslaved initially by the Muslim invaders and then British colonialists. So we got independence in 1947. Japan already had been a superpower and had been defeated in the World War II. Now you have to realize that the military nationalism Japanese had got transformed and displaced into economic nationalism. Japanese were fierce warriors, and when they abhorred violence after the Second World War or were forced to renounce violence by their American conquerors, they put their soul and might into economic nationalism, and they worked very hard. They became economic superpower because of the hard work. So there are certain phases in modern time India-Japan relationship. If you look the World War II time and you talk to the survivors of World War II, Indian survivors of World War II in Southeast Asia and Indian diaspora, they would have a very, very poor assessment and impression of Japanese. The reason was that the Japanese imperial forces did a lot of abuse of Indian civilians in Southeast Asia and captured POWs, Indian POWs, and there were allegations that Japanese soldiers actually indulged in cannibalism of Indian soldiers. This is a historical fact. We cannot actually disregard it. After the World War II, when Japanese military leaders were put to trial in an international criminal tribunal for Far East, one of the judges was an Indian judge, Radha Govindpal. He was the only judge that voted against conviction of Japanese military leader. So the vote was like 8-1. And Japanese people do regard Radha Govindpal in a very high light. But that was it. We were more focused into our cultural influences. Japanese were taking a very strong, disciplined business culture, which Indians did not have. India did not have. Hence, India under a socialist economy could not vibe with a Japan that was de facto occupied by American capitalist forces and forced to work in economic direction. So Japanese worked very hard and, became an economic superpower. I would say that the first interest Japan had in India or India had in Japan in the modern times was when Suzuki came under Indira Gandhi's government because her son was trying to develop a small car, could not do it, so the option was Maruti. That was the first Japanese investment into India. And if you look at the current foreign minister, he calls it actually Maruti revolution kind of thing in India-Japan relationship. Maruti was a successful partnership between India and Japan, but there were a lot of problems that were reflected in the business cultures of those two countries. I do remember when I was at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, once in a while Japanese workers and Japanese officials will come for treatment, and that treatment was because of certain happenings in the Maruti plant. There were several times there were unexplained fires, and these people were very afraid of losing their life. Labor unrest, because of Japanese style of management, they were used to working very hard, and Indian workers were unionized, and there were labor unrest. So in 2012, actually, there was like riot and death of a manager. So we had this kind of thing. And the owner of the original Suzuki, he came quite a few times, and he actually restricted the breaks to a 30-minute lunch break and 2 7.5 minutes tea breaks. And that was resented by the workers. And in fact, the Indian managers had to tell Mr. Suzuki that that is a little bit harsh. But you look at, Japanese were trying to make the whole production very efficient at the cost of labor, because they are used to the same thing in other countries. In Japan, every Japanese worker, works more than 60 hours a day. There was a time I visited Japan in 1983, and I saw that even office workers, they would be returning home after 9 p.m. People, even if the shutters are down, people will still be working in their offices till 9 p.m. and then taking the local, metro trains back to home. There is a word called karoshi in Japanese that means death by overwork. So Japanese system was geared towards overwork by the workers that led to the prosperity, economic prosperity of Japan. In case of United States, the economic prosperity was because of slave labor, historically black slave labor. In case of Japan, after the whole country was ruined in Second World War, Japanese people rose up to the challenge. They worked very hard, and that's how Japan rose very fast. So there was a mismatch in cultures, and we saw that in Maruti kind of experiment. The second wave of Japanese investments in India were in metros. Delhi Metro had a substantial, sort of Japanese investment and technology transfer. And of course, after Narendra Modi's assuming prime ministership, this bullet train thing. But I think whereas we are more into, cultural history and all, Japanese are very businesslike. For them, investment into India is any investment. And if does not give the guaranteed returns, they are not going to be interested. The other thing is that Japanese system is very disciplined. Despite, criminal gangs and yakuza, the ordinary business actually runs very smoothly. Japanese people are very honest. They are very disciplined. In India, you don't find that kind of labor environment. So the management feels that it is not worth wasting their time. They can do their investment in China, where they have a captive labor. They can do in other Southeast Asian countries where unions are not so strong. In India, it's the unions that create problems for Japanese investments. So a little bit of slowing is because of different cultures in these two countries. And unless India changes its labor laws, labor environment, a drop of a hat, there will be a strike. The workers will get out, will go on a sit-in or hurt the managers. And that is what the Japanese managers don't like. So there is not too much of buy-in in investment into India. Having said that, Japanese have shown their interest in investing in India's northeast because they feel culturally kind of, having more like Oriental kind of race or that kind of thing. Japanese are also investing in India's near abroad, countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So they want to broad base their investment. They want to have influence everywhere. Japanese are also very interested in investing into Buddhist countries. So sometimes, like Japanese will go ahead and invest in Myanmar. From India's side, time and time and again, because of the military coups, India had to withdraw, stop paying attention under US pressure. They didn't want us to engage with Myanmar, but Japanese continued to be there despite being allies of United States. So there are factors like this. But there's one more thing I will talk about. There's a little bit of racial arrogance on part of Japanese. The other is a geopolitical issue that prevents closer bilateral relationship, and that is an 800-pound gorilla called United States. Japanese are treaty allies of United States. Their foreign policy is de facto dictated by US interests because they are treaty allies. Whereas India has been at one point in time much more close to Soviet Union, having exercised its strategic autonomy. India makes decisions that are in favor of India issue by issue. So more recent months or last couple of years, Japan and India didn't see eye to eye about Russian war in Ukraine. Japanese were very miffed that their supply planes to Ukraine were not given, landing rights in India, for refueling purposes and things like that. So there is a political divide also. Yes, we are friendly, but they will follow lock, stock, and barrel what United States dictates. India will not. US still has bases in Japan. They are still under the nuclear protection umbrella of United States. So there are nuances. Does it mean that the relationship will not grow? No, it will definitely grow. It will definitely deepen. There are other areas where we can focus on collaborating in future, but we need to understand the historical baggage, why there is lack of attention from Japan into India.
Thank you so much, sir, for your explanation actually. But your answer has made me more curious about the India-Japan relationship. And some question is coming on my mind. Actually, I have been to Japan Foundation in Delhi a few years back. And I learned that the government of Japan is very much interested in creating a people-to-people contact from Japan to India. Because they think they like India very much, but there is a disconnect between the Indian people and Japanese people. They are not able to connect with each other. So the government of Japan is trying a lot to cultivate this relationship actually. And they are trying to teach the Indian people the Japanese language so that they can communicate with Japan. So what I want to ask you, do you think the attitude of the government of Japan is real towards creating a deep relation with the Indian people, with the people-to-people contact, or they are bound by the relationship with their other countries actually? So they are trying to contact a close contact with Indian people, but they are not succeeding because I am not seeing that the people of India has become more interested about the culture of Japan, and the Japan government or the Japanese people have become the more interested in the Indian story or Indian people actually.
So talking about people-to-people contact, I think we realize that India was a colony of Britain, and our higher education system is English-based, English language-based. So people-to-people relationship and diaspora, Indian diaspora's choices or Indians' choices to go to countries for other opportunities are governed by linguistic factors also. So largest number of students from India are in US and Canada because of the language issue. And in case of Canada, because of special relationship between Canada and people of Punjab. Also other Anglophile countries like UK, Australia, New Zealand, that is where Indian students go without any problems because of the ease of the language. Now, Japanese language is a pictographic language, So to learn Japanese is a bit hard. And an ordinary Indian is not, thinking in those terms. So if Japanese government, creates some, pool of scholarships into Japanese language, opens Japanese language schools in India, that will generate some interest in young people. There are other countries that have, their own linguistic, like Germany teaches German language through Max Muller Bhavans. France teaches French language to Alliance du Français. Similarly, if Japanese language were to start teaching some language schools, either university-based or autonomously, there will be more receptivity and provide some scholarships to Indian students. I am pretty sure they will go, because once the students start going, there'll be much more interest. And similarly, Indian government needs to start some scholarships for Japanese students. So both the governments have to take this into consideration, keeping in mind, the linguistic problem. In the past, the linguistic problem did not exist, as I was talking to you, that there are Sanskrit slokas that are chanted in Japan in the Japanese version or whatever oral tradition. But if you look at the words, they are Sanskrit words. So it has not been a barrier in the past and it should not be now. So yes, there is a scope despite Japan being under US umbrella. And there is a scope for, joint collaboration in other spheres that we have not had so far. And I can tell you where we are going now. We are going into collaboration into rare earths, into semiconductors, into artificial intelligence, possibly robotics, and also possibly India-Japan defense relationship. These are the areas that would be open for Japan, depending upon their level of comfort or discomfort, because ultimately they have to listen to their US masters, whatever they say. And that is a reality we cannot disregard. India is a fiercely independent, strategically autonomous country that determines its own foreign policy. It's not so with Japan. Prime ministers come, the Japanese politics has been dominated by LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, which almost is like a club of business people. Various factions are by various, interest groups. And the prime ministers don't last very long. Average tenure of a Japanese prime minister may be 2 years. So you have empty suits sitting there, except for one or two who were very charismatic, like Shinzo Abe. Prime ministers don't last very long. So there's hardly any personal impression left on foreign policy. Everything is in continuation of the past. And that is where there is a little bit of disconnect. I'm not being pessimistic. I'm still very optimistic, but I'm just letting you know what is the reality of Japanese politics. They are a democracy, but they are a democracy in which just one party is dominant, and it's the business interests that divide various factions, and leadership changes. There's no strong political leadership there.
Thank you so much, sir. But as I have said earlier several times, I am very much interested in drawing some learning from the interview or whatever videos I make for my YouTube channel, for some learning for the general people. So this is ultimately the general people of this country, I mean India, and the general people of the country of Japan. So draw some learning from them. So do you think connecting with India would help the people of Japan and the people of India to be benefited with the interaction with India or the connection with India or dealing with the cultural with India? So what the people in general should we do as a person and or as a society or government also I should include? What initiatives should be taken by them? So if you have some idea, do share with us.
No, I think there are. Sky is open as far as bilateral cooperation is concerned. Sky is the limit. And if we talk about cooperation, there can be multiple levels of cooperation. First level of cooperation is G to G, government to government. Second is business to business level. Third is civil society level, and fourth is individual level. And in all those spheres, there's a scope for furthering, deepening interest. Now, I told you there is one limitation: United States governing Japanese foreign policy. or their geopolitical postures. But there's again an unseen elephant in the room, or I should say unseen dragon in the room, that is China. And we have some convergence of strategic interests in trying to prevent China from becoming a hegemon in Asia. Japanese are very concerned about China's military expansionist postures in their neighborhood, especially because Chinese are claiming certain islands in Japan Sea. Those are Senkaku Islands, which China calls Diaolu Islands, and there's a confrontation pretty much on a daily basis where Chinese airplanes violate the airspace of Japanese islands or send naval vessels from plan that will enter into Japanese waters. So Japan is very concerned about China's belligerent behavior. Japan is afraid that at some point in China will send its plan or PLA forces to Senkaku Islands. So there is a threat all the time. Initially, Japan tried to deal with that threat by investing massively in China's economic infrastructure, hundreds of billions of dollars. But despite that investment, China's behavior, the behavior of Chinese Communist Party has not changed. And there is a realization in Japan that they should not be putting all their eggs into one basket. That's why they are diversifying. They've gone to rest of the Southeast Asia, and they are trying to engage India because India also has concerns about China's rise. So, as I said, like semiconductors, because China was kind of controlling that, rare earths. Probably people don't know that China punished Japan in 2011 and stopped export of lithium and other rare earths on which they had monopoly to Japan following some bilateral dispute. So we have opportunity. Very recently, in India, we found very good deposits of lithium in Jammu and Kashmir, and I think in Rajasthan also. So we have opportunities to have bilateral cooperation, whether that is in semiconductors, whether that is in rare earth. And government of India and Japan have, signed memorandum of understanding in these areas. Artificial intelligence, robotics are other areas. Japan is slowly de-risking and friend-shoring its industries to other Southeast Asian countries, which are in the same cultural realm as Japan, countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. They're a little bit slow on India for the historical reasons I discussed with you, our labor program, our lawlessness, or, industrial actions that create problems for management. So we'll have to deal with that, especially these, unexplained fires in the factories and, people surrounding the managers and trying to threaten to kill them. We will have to change that behavior if we want to invite international capital. But one area I will talk about, that is the defense cooperation. India's defense budget at this point in time is $74 billion US dollars. Japan's defense budget is only $54 billion. And Japanese defense forces, initially under Japanese constitution that did not allow for warmongering or, sending Japanese defense forces for offensive purposes abroad, there is some changing there because of threat from China. Japan used to be a, naval superpower, but after the Second World War, all their, aircraft carriers, etc., were decommissioned under US pressure. Very recently, Japan has developed 2 aircraft carriers, and they are called Kawa and Izumo. They are like 27,000 tons displacement. India has expertise actually in handling and now designing and constructing aircraft carriers. Indian aircraft carriers are like 45,000 tons. If you look at average Ford class US aircraft carriers, they are 100,000 tons.
Right.
And China is building aircraft carriers in the range of 60 to 70,000 tons. So there is a scope for India, to do reverse technology transfer with Japan if both governments are savvy enough that Japan probably can benefit from Indian expertise in designing aircraft carrier, and we can sell that expertise to Japan because it's a friendly nation. And that is how you build your own military industrial complex. Designing and completing one aircraft carrier takes almost 10 years. If there's Japanese investment coming, we can have more, docks where the production capacity can be doubled with Japanese investment. And we could design, build, and sell Japan an aircraft carrier. It's a novel idea, out of the box idea, but that will, strengthen the relationship further bilaterally on government to government basis. And of course, business to business relationships are dependent on business houses.
Okay, so thank you so much for your explanation, sir. You have already asked and answered my next question. So I am moving to my third question. That is the last question actually, and 5 minutes of time left. So my third question is, how important are India and Japan for each other? So what's your perspective?
I think without even realizing how important are we to each other, it has been reflected in the third incarnation of Quad. You remember that the first incarnation of Quad was around 2005 to 2007, after the 2005-2006 Asian tsunami. There was some naval cooperation, rescue, and recovery missions by navies in the region in which Indian Navy and Japanese Navy participated together. Japanese naval forces have been participating in India's Malabar exercises, naval exercises 2012. So first version of Quad, again, Shinzo Abe was the person behind it, was the visionary Australian skilled Quad 1.0. And the Australian Prime Minister at that time was a Mandarin-speaking Sinophile. He basically came under the influence of Chinese Communist Party and basically killed Quad number 1. After Shinzo Abe came, second time, in power, Quad 2 was revived. And, this was the time when in United States, Trump was the president. It had its own, improvement over Quad 1.0. But currently, the Quad 3.0 that came in Biden's time has been the most comprehensive, has a program. It's not a military relationship, but it is going into other spheres of development, whether that is vaccine production, whether it is, rare earth cooperation, institutionalizing the Malabar exercises involving other countries like Australia and then sometimes Singapore or sometimes French. So under Quad 3.0, there's a convergence of interests. And what Kevin Rudd had done with Quad 1.0 no longer exists. Australia is now fully committed to the Quad project as a geostrategic project, not as a military alliance. It cannot be a military alliance because India does not believe in military alliances. But it is a strategic partnership between the four nations, and it has a lot of downstream consequences. So both countries need each other. They know we are facing on line of control and line of actual control with China on our northern border, and Japan is facing Chinese hostilities in Sea of Japan. So to develop bilateral alliances is important for both the nations, and both of the nations do realize that, although the pace may be slow because of certain reasons, both countries need each other. There's a lot of goodwill for each other. We talked about people-to-people relationship, what we can do by student exchanges. Other area that we can work together is India has traditionally provided human resources to all the countries. We export human resources. We export services. Japanese society is a graying, aging society that is declining. The birth rate has gone down and they do not have enough workers.
I am sorry, sir, but we have only half a minute left for this session, so please finish before that.
So we can also provide some, human resources, professionals, and workers to Japanese industry that will, besides investments bilaterally. So I'm very optimistic about the relationship. Past is over, and we need to focus on future. And both countries realize that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful explanation for all the questions. We are going to end this session and we'll be meeting again after some time, 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay. My pleasure.
Thank you so much, viewer. So please wait, we are coming again on the session.